Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Damron. We're playing Elder Scrolls Online. We are on Graven Deep, part of the Lost Depths DLC that came out in Elder Scrolls Online. This is a very challenging veteran dungeon, as are a lot of the DLC dungeons, but the final boss in this particular dungeon is probably one of the hardest in the game. If you haven't seen any of my guides before, we will keep this as a complete playthrough. I'll show everything in the game, but we'll focus a lot on boss mechanics. We'll touch on a lore of the dungeon, which is very interesting in this particular dungeon, but also I'll have everything timestamped in the comments and description, so if there's a particular boss that you're coming here for, you know, feel free to check that, click that, and you can hear all the mechanics about that particular boss. But we will keep this complete, and as we're going forward, let's go ahead and talk about some of the trash mobs that are in this particular dungeon, and that is the Pangrit. And these are these kind of small gore-like creatures, and you saw in the distance my buddy had this AoE on him. So what they'll do is they'll put this AoE around you, and I'll show you in a minute because it'll happen to me. And when that happens, you have to find this mound of dirt that's kind of spewing this green kind of steam-like nastiness, right? And you need to go over that and then use your synergy on that to blow it up and stop them from spawning, or those enemies will keep spawning in. And that'll be important for a little bit later when we're fighting the boss. Also, if you don't use your synergy on those mounds, you will leave a large poisonous AoE left behind. So you saw right there, I had the AoE, I didn't use it on the mound, and now there's this large AoE of poison sitting on the ground here. So this was the mound that I should have used the synergy on that, but I just couldn't find it in that particular moment. But you really want to do that, because if you start having lots of poison AoEs around you, see right here, that's what you want to do. Go to the mound, use your synergy, and it will dissipate that mound. And I'll show you what will also happen. I don't mean to do this, I just kind of suck, right? But I meant to use my synergy on a mound up here. If you don't use your synergy and you let that AoE fill up the circle, it will instantly kill you. So I go here, I'm like, all right, I guess I'm just not going to use the synergy bristle pitch, and I let that AoE just kill me. So that's how you kind of want to deal with the Pangrits. The other trash mob that you're seeing right here are the Hadalids. There are several different types of them. You have the cleaver ones that have a two-handed sword. You have the tie collar. You have different types, and essentially they do have a lot of health, but as long as your tank is holding on to that damage, you really shouldn't have to worry too much about them. Just kind of burst them down. So we're coming up on the first secret boss of the dungeon, Mzugru, and I'll show you exactly where he is on the map after we kill these trash mobs. And also, I'll just mention at this point, like, this dungeon has a very cool lore to it, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But the lore of Graven Deep is very, very interesting. So after we've killed those first kind of trash mobs, we're going to head to the right, kind of off the main path, and you'll see this kind of dwarven structure leading into this security depot. So this is right where I'm at on the map. You're going to go up the path, just hang a right, go up that dirt pile, and go down in here, and you're going to see Mzugru, or however that's said, a security drone boss, and he's going to be kind of in this shield, and you're going to see these 4 control knobs around him. You basically have to use those in the correct order to unlock the boss, and that order is random every time you play the dungeon. So you just kind of click them and figure it out. It's not hard, so just kind of mess with it until you get the right sequence. And once you do, then the boss will spawn in and he's ready to be fought. And this is essentially just kind of a glorified dwarven centurion. He doesn't really do many things that you need to worry about. Obviously his heavy attack can do a lot of damage, but of course your tank will be holding on to that. He doesn't have a lot of health. Throughout the fight he will shield himself, and at that point you need to find the pylon that is activated, which is kind of having a bolt of lightning going to the boss, creating that shield. And until you take out that power transmitter, you won't be able to do any more damage to Mzugru himself. The other attack that he'll sometimes do the spinning attack that basically all dwarven centurions do throughout the game, and he'll also cast lightning bolts every once in a while. He'll kind of throw them up into the sky, and after a while they'll come down and create small little AoEs that you can just stay out of. But again, super easy. All the secret bosses are just basically kind of glorified ads, not very hard. You should be able to take that out no problem. And when you do kill him, you'll get the shield generator, which will increase your health by 10%. And also when you get hit, you'll get the centurion shield for 10 seconds, which reduces damage taken by 50%, and that can occur every 40 seconds. So that's really, really nice. Gonna help us out a lot while we're fighting the bosses throughout this dungeon. So once you've done that secret boss, now we'll just kind of continue up the path, and we will next be right at our first main boss of the dungeon, the Euphotic Gatekeeper. So you're going to go through this gate and you're going to see him actually sitting up on this rock, and what we're going to have to do is kill these pengrits and do that mechanic that I was talking about earlier. When they cast that AoE on you, you're going to need to take that over these kind of, mounds and use your synergy on them. The boss will not come down here until you do that, and if you don't do that, again, it will create those large poisonous AoEs on the ground that you're going to have to avoid until they dissipate. So don't do that. Basically, just kind of take those synergies over the mounds, as you saw my buddy do right there, and once you dissipate the poison from all three of those mounds, now the Euphotic Gatekeeper will jump down here and you will begin the first main boss fight of this dungeon. So let's go ahead and get that done. Here we go. We're going to synergize on that last mound. He's going to jump down here, and basically the way this fight is going to work, it's not too bad. It's a little bit annoying because he does jump around a lot, so the tank can't really hold him in one location like you would really like, if you're an AoE type DPS. Throughout the fight, those pengrits are going to spawn in, and you need to run to those mounds that the game has been showing you and use that bristle synergy to explode that mound. If you don't do that, that's how this fight can become more challenging. Not only because those pengrits will just continuously spawn from those mounds, but also if you're not using that synergy on them, you're going to create a lot of those poisonous AoEs on the field that you and your buddies are going to need to avoid. So obviously, if you get that, make sure you synergize. That's the most important thing about the battle. Other than that, the DPS just needs to focus on him when he can, when he's kind of standing still. The other attacks that he going to do, you can't really interrupt them, right? So when he does his charge attack, in which he just kind of goes around the room, he'll put all these small little AoEs in a bunch of different directions, and also if he hits you with his teleport attack during that, it'll knock you back. The good thing about all of those attacks is they don't really do a lot of damage. You can get hit from them and it's not going to kill you. It's just going to annoy you more than anything. The only thing that's really going to cause you problems is that pengrit AoE. Remember, it will instantly kill you, or you could survive it if you have a large shield on, I should say, but it will kill most of your DPS players. So make sure you're synergizing that on the mounds. Do your damage when you can, and this fight is probably the easiest boss fight in the dungeon. It shouldn't give you too much problem, especially if you're planning on beating it on vet. We got a very, very challenging fight coming up a little bit later. So go ahead and finish him off, and once you take out the Euphotic Gatekeeper, now we will be able to enter into the Dwarven Observatory, where things get a little bit interesting. And this is where we're going to talk a little bit about the lore, because the lore of this dungeon is quite interesting actually. So Graven Deep is an islet located off the southwest coast of High Isle, generally reached by ships from Amino Station. However, it's located in an area in the Abatian Sea that is thought to be kind of treacherous, in the sense that when ships go there, they vanish and they never return. And this particular islet is connected to this Dwarven Observatory now that we have gone into, located on a seabed, supposedly containing a machine that can potentially manipulate the weather, which is pretty crazy. So in fact, how you and your crew got here is that you have been shipwrecked and you are the only survivors, along with one other person who is from the Mages Guild. He's an explorer known as Dulef, a pirate explorer. He's with you, and he says he's here, and he wants to figure out what has happened to the legendary Druid King's voyage into the Sistras, where he was lost, and no one ever really knows what happens. So as you're battling your way through this ancient dwarven complex, you're trying to solve this mystery of what happened to this Druid King's voyage. And there's several kind of books littered throughout the dungeon that are going to give us hints as to what happened, and one of them is written by Anwas, which is a faithful servant of King Kasoran, who was the Druid King himself. And you learn that they actually seek to establish a new dominion where druids could thrive and practice their own beliefs without the interference of outsiders. So you're on the sea with this king and her friend Beatrice, searching for a new land for them to kind of cultivate and create a new home. And after many days, and they kind of get to the point where they're sailing across the Evasion Sea, there's note that a storm and winds have picked up and starts pushing them south, and it brings them to this isolated island where they found the entryway to this dwarven area that we are in right now. And they've never had this experience before, right? But one of the explorers with them named Sayer argues, say, we need to open this dwarven construct, we need to explore it and go in. And while many of them kind of relented that at first and didn't want to do that, ultimately they decided to go ahead with his request and open the dwarven door, where Sayer ran ahead. And they chased after him, but they never found Sayer in his normal form again. The next time he was seen hollering throughout the halls with nonsensical talk, he was noted to not have his normal body anymore, but only his spirit. And also she refers to him as an abomination. So it's only thought that they eventually died here, as well as another explorer named Gibberel who arrived here and died at the hands of the construct that we fought earlier. So people got here and were locked here, and sometimes they were turned into these spirit forms. So either Sayer is these drowned captain ads that we've experienced, or he's indeed the abomination that we fight during the final boss fight. So it's very interesting, the kind of words they use to describe what Sayer become. Either he's a spirit or he is the abomination in the final fight. So very cool lore in this dungeon. I hope you all enjoyed that. And that's going to bring us to our second secret boss in the dungeon. So I showed you where that was on the map, right? We kind of go into this area, which is on the southern section of this portion of the dungeon. And ultimately you're going to go into this kind of hallway of lasers. And what you have to do is you have to get past these lasers, not like I'm doing here. I'll show you a really easy trick to do it. If you look to the wall where the lasers are coming out, it's much easier to make your way through. But ultimately only one player has to make it to the end and then use the switch at the end of the hallway to dissipate all the lasers, which brings us to Xzyviian the defense crawler, which again is a kind of glorified dwarven construct, kind of spider ad. It's really very, very easy. He will cast fire meteors. You're seeing that right there. So it'll create a lot of fire AoEs on the ground. Obviously don't just stand in those. Honestly, they don't do that much damage. Even if you do, your healer can probably heal you through it. As long as the tank is maintaining his kind of light and heavy attacks, which also don't do that much damage, you really aren't going to have much to worry about with this secret boss. He will jump up in the air as well. You're seeing that as well, where he'll create a large AoE from where he jumped up from. Again, doesn't do a lot of damage, but you can step out of that and mitigate any and all damage if you'd like to. He will kind of spray some fire out of the front of him as well, but again, the damage output from Xzyviian is minimal, not much to worry about. When you do beat him, you will get another character perk, Defense System, which will increase your magic by 10%. You'll also gain access to use the laser defense systems throughout the dungeon, which are kind of helpful in some scenarios, but not really. But you can use these every 60 seconds per defense system. So this is it right here. If you walk up to the wall, you'll see an option to interact with it, and you'll create a laser that kind of shoots across in a straight direction from that point. While this is pretty cool, it's not really that useful. I mean, it's good for kind of ad control. You can see one right here. There's a laser right there on the pipe right in front of us. You can use it for ad control. They're also in the final boss fight. You could use them again for a little bit of ad control on some of the spirit forms. But again, it's kind of just another mechanic that honestly you're not going to have a lot of time to think about in that final fight. There's a lot going on in this final boss. So, I think the lasers, they're a cool concept, probably on normal difficulty, a little bit more fun to use, but in the veteran dungeon, I don't think they're going to provide you a lot of utility because we have some other things that we're going to need to focus on. As we're progressing on, so we've kind of cleared out this section. Now we're heading into the second main boss of the dungeon, and this guy can be pretty tough. So here you go. Here's Do Left saying we can't go through that door. We got to find another way, which is conveniently right here through this cave system with some pretty cool stalagmites and stalactites in this area. I think they look pretty cool. The look of this dungeon I think is very fun. Actually, I like the graphics of it. I like the kind of variability from being outside to being in the Dwarven complex, and a little bit later something that we've never done in Elder Scrolls Online before, and that is be able to go underwater with our character. So pretty cool. So here we go. We're on to the second main boss in the dungeon, which is Varzunon, who is a large kind of, again, glorified kind of bone colossus. All the enemies and bosses tend to be glorified ads in this particular dungeon, but he's going to be in the middle. This is a very large kind of arena for this boss battle. And the reason is because throughout the fight, he's going to be spawning in skeletons, and that's the main thing that we need to focus on. Okay, so the tank is going to pull him. We don't like to keep the boss in the middle. We like to keep him to the outside. That way the tank can move around depending on where these skeletal sacrifices spawn. And that's going to make a little bit more sense in just a minute. But when he spawns a bunch of skeletons, 2 of them will be glowing blue, and they'll be skeletal sacrifices that are making their way to him. And if they get to him, he will consume them. He will grow in strength and become stronger, doing more damage with his attacks and taking less damage from yours. And this is what he does when he kind of glows his hands together like that. He's summoning skeletons. So you see all these skeletons spawning around him, and then you need to find the 2 blue skeletal sacrifices. So the damage dealers need to quickly look around and figure out where they are and kill them as quickly as possible, because what you don't want is actually what's going to happen right here. He just consumed one, and that's because we got a little bit unlucky. They spawned like right beside him, but ideally what you want to do is have your damage dealers kill those as fast as possible and have your tank kind of steering Varzunon away from where they spawn, so you can kind of move around the room with the tank and keeping Varzunon away from the skeletal sacrifices, so the damage dealers have more time to kill them before he consumes them. Obviously, the more skeletal sacrifices that he consumes, the harder this fight's going to be. Now, you're also going to see his main heavy attack, which he kind of does a little stomp attack in the direction of whoever has the taunt. That does a heavy amount of damage, and if he consumes about 2, 3, 4 skeletons, that attack's pretty much going to kill your tank even. So that's kind of the problem. If he gets too powerful, it's really going to cause a lot of problems. So you really want to focus on taking out the skeletal sacrifices as quickly as possible. Another thing that can happen as he is doing this, you're seeing us getting attacked by these things coming out of the sky. Those are meteors. You can't avoid them. They're going to hit every player, so you need to heal through that. He'll also put a hand grasp around one random player. You saw that happen to me just now. So whoever is grasped by the hand, the other damage dealer needs to be able to come and do damage to the hand in order to free that player. So that's what you saw there, and you saw our tank leading Varzunon away from the skeletal sacrifices that were spawning in. So he led him away. It gave us more time to kill the skeletal sacrifices, and even though I got locked up by the hand, it gave the other DPS time to free me, and we then killed the second skeletal sacrifice that spawned. So the other attack that he'll do, you can see these small little AoEs, these kind of lightning and fire AoEs that are around. Again, just kind of stay out of those. Here's the meteor attack. Again, it's unavoidable. So I just mentioned, you just need to heal through that. As you get kind of near the end of the fight, right? So we're at this point, we're in execute. He only had 15% left. He spawned in some more skeletal sacrifices, but we figured no worries. Let's just go ahead and finish him off. You also see him do his stomp attack, which creates a large AoE around him. Be sure you're getting out of that. The tank can probably withstand that, but all your other players, if you're in that large stomp attack, it probably will kill you. So it seems like a lot going on in this fight, but there's not really, okay? You just need to focus on taking those skeletal sacrifices down and have the tank moving Varzunon away from wherever the skeletal sacrifices spawn. That's why we like to keep him on the outside, so we can just rotate clockwise or counterclockwise depending on where they spawn. If you're in the middle, then technically no matter where they spawn, they're pretty close, right? So that's my recommendation. Stay outside, move around, take out those skeletal sacrifices, and let's get moving on to one of the coolest parts of this dungeon as we take a fall into the Tempest Observatory. pretty cool drop. So we're heading in. There is another ad that we're going to talk about as we go through this door. You're going to finally be coming on the Wraith ads, which have a lot of health. They have 1,000,000 health, but they also do a lot of damage. So this is the Wraith trash mob here. You can see it's got 1.2 million health, so that's quite a bit. But the thing that you need to worry about is its heavy attack will likely kill you in one shot if you're not the tank. So tank, be sure you're holding on to these Wraiths as we're pushing forward and taking out these mobs. Now the Wraith can also fear you, so you know, technically even if the tank has control, he could fear the tank and then heavy attack another player, so just keep that in mind. But just burn them down like as always, and we're gonna get moving on. Take a little break here as we kind of clean up some of these ads. Alright, so we were coming up on the third and final secret boss of the game, which is Chralzak, and this is going to give us our third kind of ability. So in this third kind of section of the Tempest Observatory, again, head to the southern side. You saw that kind of entryway that led down to here, and what you're going to see is a lot of hexagonal, you know, floor plates that some are occupied by electricity and some are not. You can't step on the ones that are occupied by electricity, and there's several kind of switches up on the platform that we were just on, and it's kind of random every time. You're just going to have to play with it a little bit, but have one player up there, and when you hit a particular switch, it's going to turn some off and it's going to turn some on, some back on. So you just kind of have to mess with it to see which ones are being turned on and which ones are being turned off. I recommend only having one player do it. If you have multiple people hitting a bunch of switches, then it can be kind of confusing. But eventually, when you have a path to kind of get to the far end, you can interact with that and it will spawn Chralzak Sphere 9402A in the middle of the area, and he will again be a glorified dwarven ad, essentially a dwarven construct sphere that we can kill. He doesn't have really many attacks that you need to worry about. He does the spin attack that all of the dwarven spheres do. Again, it doesn't really do that much damage. Even as DPS, you can still stand there and bang and have your healer kind of just heal you through it. He'll also do a lightning zap where he'll zap the ground with lightning and random locations, so you can again move out of those if you want to, but if you have a good healer, again, it's probably not going to cause you many problems. You can see I was just in one right there. He doesn't have a lot of health. Again, very easy. The secret bosses in here should be no problem, but when you kill him, you're going to get remote battery, which is going to increase your stamina by 10%, but also when your stamina is reduced to less than 30%, you're going to get a supercharged stamina recovery for 4 seconds, which is really, really powerful, but that can only occur once every 60 seconds, so it's a really good way to recover a lot of stamina pretty quickly, but again, you can only use it once a minute. So once we've done that, we're going to kind of continue through this observatory, this kind of underwater badass aquarium, right? And we're going to kind of come to this last set of trash mobs, which is some bone colossus and more frost mages. So we're going to clean those up, and eventually we're going to be able to go underwater and make our way to the final boss.
I recently spent. The central room. Don't concern yourself about air.
All right, so after our little underwater adventure, which was pretty awesome, we will be in the arena where we're going to be fighting Zelvraak the Unbreathing. And this is probably, honestly, right now, I think probably the most challenging just veteran dungeon boss in the game right now. It's really up there with Scalecaller Peak, in my opinion. You know, with Scalecaller is really pretty easy until you do hard mode, but non-hard mode, Zelvraak the Unbreathing is very, very challenging. The first thing that you're going to have to do is just kind of clear the ads that are in this area before you start this boss fight, and there is a lot of mechanics that are going to be going on during this fight that I'm going to cover and I'm going to show you, and feel free to watch it a couple times so you can see all the things that I'm talking about. So what you're going to do is you're going to, you know, have your tank just kind of tank the boss in the middle of the room, okay? And he's going to do a conical attack that does a lot of damage that will be targeted on whoever has aggro. So as long as the tank is holding aggro, just stay still. You certainly don't want to be moving around and putting that conical attack on some of the other players who can't sustain the damage. He'll also do a fear attack. You're going to see this small, you can see very faintly that translucent black skull above my head. That's kind of the indicator that he's about to cast his fear attack. And the way that you can avoid that is just by turning away from him. If you're not facing him when he casts that fear attack, then you won't be feared. At 75% health, he's going to spawn his shade forms, one on each of the green kind of bone piles in the corners of the central area. And all of them will do a charge attack at the same time that will send out an attack to every player. So there's two things you can do here. You can either have one player on each corner and constantly interrupting those guys as they're kind of doing that attack so it doesn't spread around, and have your DPS go kill everybody. But also keep in mind, the other option is to simply just roll dodge those attacks and avoid the damage. But once you kill all the shades, you'll be back fighting Zelvraak. And one of the most important things that you can see in the background, you see this small blue sphere, okay? This is the most critical part of the fight, and those are the sea orbs. They will be coming down in the central portion on each side of the room, okay? So they can come down in any location. They'll make a very, you know, noticeable noise. It's like, you know, as it's coming down, and it's getting louder, okay, as it gets closer to the floor. If those orbs hit the floor, it's an instant wipe for the entire team. So you need to have one of your players dedicated to just looking for those orbs and attacking them. Generally, somebody with ranged attack, your healer can do it, someone with a staff, because all it needs is one light attack and it will go back up. Again, those are the sea orbs, most important thing in the fight. At 50% health, you're going to be sent into kind of the Shadow Realm or Zelvraak's realm, and in here you will be taking a continuous dot of damage. You're going to see a lot of fractured souls coming in through from the waters outside. You want to take out as many of those as possible while moving around and finding these spirit forms that are just standing around. If you stand next to them, you will replenish some of your health, and that's the way that you survive the Shadow Realm, is by finding these guys, getting your health back, simultaneously trying to kill as many of those spirit forms as possible. The reason you want to kill as many of those as possible is because the more of those you kill, the less strength the abomination is going to have when you come out. Similar to the second boss of the dungeon, who was kind of supping up the, you know, the skeletons. You know, the abomination here, his power is determined by the amount of those kind of spirits that get consumed in that phase. Coming out of this is the most dangerous part of the fight because the flesh abomination hits hard and he hits often. The tank is going to have to maintain the aggro of the flesh abomination while everybody else is going to try to kill him. The most critical thing to be aware of is Zelvraak's fear attack in this phase, because if he fears the tank, the abomination will then hit the tank and likely kill him. So the tank has to be aware of the fear attack coming from Zelvraak. While you're in this phase though, Zelvraak will not be spawning any of the sea orbs until he hits under 40% health. So we really want to focus our damage on the abomination. Now I am going to die right here from the other mechanic of the fight, which is Sundered Soul. Sometimes you will be torn and the soul will be taken from your body and launch across the room. You'll see this gold light that flashes from your body, and in that scenario you have to find the golden ghost and run to it in order to retrieve your soul. It's a lot to think about. As you can see, I just missed it right there, but if you die, make sure you get that res immediately as fast as possible, because again, this is a very, very, very dangerous phase. So you have to be aware of that Sundered Soul, you have to be aware of the sea orbs, and you have to get down that flesh abomination as fast as possible. If you get the flesh abomination down, you're kind of in the clear. Right now you can relax a little bit. It's just like the beginning of the fight. Now we just kind of have to worry about his fear, take care of the sea orbs, and take him down to 25%. At 25%, he's going to bring the shades back out, and it's just like the 75% phase. We need to take them down. Again, you can either roll dodge the attacks that are coming from all of the shade forms, or you can have one person on each corner interrupting that attack before it goes out. It will go to everybody. Generally though, once you kill 2 of them, it's not going to be enough damage to kill anybody. After you kill all the shades, again, Zelvraak will return. We will be in execute. Keep aware of those sea orbs, okay? Again, you're in the final phase. This is a tough fight. Make sure whoever is on those sea orbs is maintaining it as well. The other attack that he can do that I'm just going to mention briefly is an elemental attack on the ground. Depending on the classes that you bring into the fight, right? If you're a Templar or Warden, whatever class you are, that's going to determine the elemental AoEs that he puts on the ground. So sometimes he can put ice, fire, lightning, small little AoEs, poison even, on the ground, kind of around the battlefield. They don't do a lot of damage, but just keep in mind that's another attack that you could see during this fight. But as long as you follow the mechanics that I've showed you, you should be able to get through this. Again, it is a very, very tough fight. I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat it. It's hard, but you guys got to maintain focus on all of those different mechanics that I've talked about, hopefully with prioritizing those sea orbs. I hope you all found that helpful. A very, very challenging dungeon. So let's go ahead and take a look at the monster set that we're going to get out of this dungeon, which is going to be the Euphotic Gatekeeper set, which is a pretty interesting little tank set. If you have 1 piece, you're going to get some stamina recovery, but if you own 2 pieces, when you roll dodge, you'll create a Hatolid Husk that will absorb all damage if you're within 5 meters of it. It will absorb all direct damage against you, and after a second it will explode, dealing poison damage, and you can use this every 20 seconds. So it's kind of interesting. It kind of sucks though in the sense for like a tank, because it scales off of weapon and spell damage. So honestly, I'm not sure if it's going to be a good DPS set or it's going to be a good tank set depending on the things that you run it with, but nonetheless it's kind of interesting. I'll have to play with it and see how it works out. But I hope you guys found this helpful as always, and hopefully I'll see you out in Tamriel.